You can always ask that. Okay. All right, here we go. Now recording, now we're official. Here in the chat, I just shared a link to the document that is our curriculum overview. And we are now through, we're in Roman numeral 2, letter B. And last class, we talked about number 5, okay? Number 5 was a very detailed, one of the most complicated sort of ways in which we observe Shabbat is how we eat warm food on Shabbat and serve warm food on Shabbat without violating the Torah's prohibitions against cooking on the Sabbath. In ancient times, there are actually other ancient Jewish sects that didn't believe in, they thought Shabbat should be a very austere day. They didn't believe in warm food on Shabbat, and they, sat around in the dark and ate only cold food. And our ancestors, the inventors of the ones who inherited our, and created and guided our tradition of Judaism, they understood the laws of Shabbat to prohibit igniting a fire and cooking, but there are ways to serve warm food, and they're somewhat complicated laws, and you probably, it's worth reading a book about it or a chapter in a book about it, or watching someone who knows what they're doing a few times to get the hang of it. But one should eat warm food on Shabbat, have delicious food on Shabbat. It should be an enjoyable day, and the restrictions are meant to, to enable a really wonderful day. So that's letter 5 that's number 5 in letter B in Roman numeral 2. Okay, on the next page. And now letter 6 means so later on in the Hebrew Bible, after the period of the Torah itself, after the period of Moses, we have other kind of information that gets added in that sort of tells us things about Shabbat and how to observe it. And the prophets in later biblical history, they introduced this concept of not to talk about or engage in business on Shabbat. Okay, business is not technically one of the 39 categories of labor, right? The core prohibitions of Shabbat are really mostly agricultural. I guess in early biblical history, most Jews were farmers, and so it makes sense that most of the things that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat are agricultural. But as more Jews moved to the city and became merchants and artisans and craftsmen, we find commerce becoming a major occupation, and therefore a major way that we make Shabbat special is by refraining from commerce. And we don't do business on Shabbat. We don't buy and sell things. We don't talk about business affairs on Shabbat. Okay? Our conversations should be like elevated beyond the mundane. So we don't have we don't talk about like the stock market or how much this thing costs, or like we're not negotiating prices and things like that. Our conversation itself is more elevated. There's a Yiddish phrase "nicht Shabbos gerät," which means we shouldn't talk about this on Shabbos, which you say before talking about something that you're not supposed to talk about on Shabbos. So you might say to somebody, "Nicht Shabbos gerät, I heard you're selling your car," and then he says, "Nicht Shabbos gerät, that's true. It's selling it for $5,000." So he says, "Nicht Shabbos gerät, take it for $4,000." There's a famous joke about where I think the punchline is, how's it go? Somebody walks into shul Friday night and says, "Nish Shabbos gerät, I heard your car's for sale." He says, "Nish Shabbos gerät, it's true." And then Shabbos morning he says, "Nish Shabbos gerät, how much are you selling it for?" And he says, "I'm selling it for $5,000." Nish Shabbos gerät, it's not worth more than $3,000. Then and then after Shabbos, and then he says, I'm gonna ruin the joke, but he says that mincha time he comes up to him and says, "Shabbos after," he says, "Nish Shabbos gerät, how about $3,500 is my final offer." He's like, "Nish Shabbos gerät, I sold it at myself. It's already that." So you're not supposed to do that, okay? But that so don't be like that joke. The point is, you're not supposed to talk about such things on Shabbat. In terms of one sort of another sort of common, so you don't read the business paper. Don't read, if you're like when I worked at university, students would ask us, "Can we study for exams on Shabbos?" So I think it depends on what if you're reading. If the stuff you're reading is ennobling, enriching knowledge, and you're engaged in the pursuit of truth, then that might be appropriate to do on Shabbos. If you're just studying, organic chemistry for an exam, and it's not like inherently meaningful to you, you're just studying to like prepare for this test you're going to take, that seems less appropriate for Shabbos. Okay, we don't, you are allowed to give somebody a gift if it's for the Shabbos, for use on Shabbos. You can give somebody bring like a little nut platter to someone's house who's hosting you for a meal. but that's probably better than giving them something which doesn't have an immediate Shabbos use. We wouldn't give them something like that on Shabbos. Give it to them before Shabbos. Okay. Okay. Number 7. Sort of one extra layer, though, that's sort of necessary to make Shabbos like a really beautiful, relaxing day. I mean, those of you who have been studying with us for a couple of weeks, sessions, we had a whole section about the positive mitzvot of Shabbat, the positive obligation of Shabbat, the festive meal, the enjoyable family time, time with community, time for God, time for personal growth, and how the prohibitions against labor and activities are what carve out that space, that make it possible to fill that space, that time, with something really beautiful, okay? It's a palace in time, a sanctuary in time, all of these, we talked about these concepts. So the prohibitions make that possible, but the prohibitions themselves are not sufficient, because as I just mentioned a few moments ago, the prohibitions are focused on these agricultural labors, and in time, and they're very much focused on like creative labor. We talked about that. There has to be intentional activity done in a conventional way for productive purpose, right? As a considered skilled activity. Okay, that's what is prohibited on Shabbat. What's not, so it's like things that are economically productive are prohibited on Shabbat, which is to say that there's some things that fall through the cracks. For example, you're not allowed to carry from a private domain, from a public domain, from a public domain to a private domain. But within a private domain, you can carry all you want. So I could schlep heavy boxes from my basement to my attic, from my attic to my basement, up and down, up and down, up and down, all day long, without violating this, one of the 39 prohibited categories of labor, because I'm just moving things around within my home. And even though it wouldn't be a very toilsome, stressful day. Somebody could go to the office, and as long as you're not writing with a pen or pencil, you're not, you could go to meetings, you could have a factory operating using timers that were set, you could engage in all sorts of, you could sit at the marketplace and buy and sell things without violating any of the biblical prohibitions, right? Because none of the 39 categories of labor are entailed in all of these everyday economic activities. Okay, and so, and again, especially as Jews left the farms, it became, at some point in, thousands of years ago, most Jews stopped being farmers and became dwellers of cities, and we've never left. Okay, but that means that the 39 categories of labor include things that you might never do, even during the week. When was the last time you plowed or sheared a sheep? Probably many years. Okay, when was the last time you winnowed? Okay, have you ever winnowed in your life? Maybe not. Okay, so Shabbat might be no different than a weekday for those of us who aren't farmers. And this was true already thousands of years ago. And so the rabbis had a couple of ways of responding to that, of making sure that Shabbat remained a special day. One way was with rabbinic prohibitions, and we talked about prohibition against talking about weekday activities, prohibition against engaging in commerce, buying and selling, which I mentioned earlier. Another way of solving this problem was to recognize when the Torah describes Shabbat, it doesn't just say, don't do any melacha, don't do any creative activity like these 39 categories of labor. The Torah also says that it should be a restful day. The Torah uses the word Shabbaton, which means the day should be restful. And Ramban, one of the great medieval Torah scholars, writes that Shabbaton is a positive obligation, that the Sabbath day should be a restful, tranquil day. And that obligation is independent of the 39 categories of labor. Okay, so schlepping boxes from my attic to my basement and back and forth is not a violation of any of the 39 categories of labor, but if I do it, the day will not be tranquil and peaceful and special and holy and relaxing. And that's important too. And this becomes really, really important in modern times, when we're even farther removed from farming. We don't do any of those forbidden labors, maybe ever, even during the week either. Shabbat would be no different. Oh, and that's another way that the rabbis in ancient times, they instituted a series of rabbinic restrictions. I think it's the next item, called muktzah, right? Objects and items that have no Shabbos purpose, that are set aside, we're not supposed to move them around. So we shouldn't move around stuff, that includes things like rocks and sticks and things that aren't tools, just like things in nature that are, don't move them on Shabbat unless you designate before Shabbat, this rock is going to be my paperweight. I'm going to designate it before Shabbat. If it's just a rock in the world, it's not a tool, don't move it on Shabbat. Something which has a non-Shabbat purpose, like a pair of scissors, right? Don't move it around on Shabbat because it's used for something, some forbidden activity. But so that's another way where through those rabbinic rules, the rabbis made sure the Shabbat was special, that it would be different from a weekday, but also just this general concept like Shabbaton, there's a positive obligation to make it a special day and a different day. So how this gets really, really relevant in modern times is with the invention of electricity. When electricity was invented, everyone knew that it was problematic to use electricity on Shabbat, but nobody could, meaning manipulate electronic devices, turn them on and off and adjust them. But nobody could figure out precisely why. Some people said electricity is, using electronic devices is forbidden within the category of igniting a fire. You turn on an electric device, the electric current that flows through the wires is like a little fire that goes through the wires, okay? What's problematic with that explanation? It's not true. Electricity, not fire going through wires, okay? Another explanation proffered was that electricity is completing an object. One of the 39 categories of labor is completing something, the final hammer blow that turns something from being unfinished to finished. So that might be tuning a guitar or plugging in my guitar to an amplifier and adjusting, I have something which isn't done now it's done, okay? Setting up something that, so maybe I turn on my radio before it's not a radio and I turn on the switch, I complete that circuit. When the switch turns, there's like a electric circuit, that switch, now current is flowing and the radio is operational. I have completed that radio. Problem with that explanation is that it's not really true. The radio is a completed radio before I turn it on. It's just not on. I'm operating a radio. I'm not completing something, right? The good analogy would be a folding chair. When I open a folding chair, I'm not building a chair. I'm operating a folding chair that's meant to open and close. And the same is, if I close a door, I'm not building a wall. Closing a door and closing a circuit are very similar. Neither one of them is building, neither one of them is completing. It's meant to operate open and closed states. That's how it's meant to be. The door is meant to operate open and closed states. The folding chair is meant to operate open and closed states. And the electric switch is meant to operate in open and closed states. So that also seems not to be a compelling explanation. It seems to be that what we come down to is, so some electronic devices are actually doing some other forbidden activity, like an electronic lawnmower is cutting the grass that's growing. That's no different than any other form of cutting something growing on the ground as one of the 39 categories. So if the electric device is doing something, I shear a sheep with an electric razor, okay? So I use electricity to do something otherwise forbidden, that's the same. An incandescent light bulb, the old-fashioned incandescent light bulbs, in which a filament is heated until it glows, that's also probably one of these biblical categories of labor. But otherwise, like, using a phone or something, no, there's nothing it does that is that is prohibited. It's other than the fact that from the beginning of the time that electricity was invented, the universal practice among Sabbath observant Jews was not to use electronic devices on the Sabbath day or on holidays. And I think it's an expression of this biblical obligation, this Torah mitzvah, that Shabbat should be a special, different, holy day. And for those of us who don't plow or winnow or reap or weave, right, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis ever, okay, not checking email, not using my phone, not accessing electronic media, that is among the most distinctive ways that Shabbat is special and different and holy. So I think it's really, really important, really, really important. And I'd say this might be like the ritual element of Orthodox Judaism that's like most distinct. This is our contribution to the world, okay? This is our ritual practice that sets us apart most from any other human being, any other religious group or ethnic group, right? That we don't use electronic devices, electronic communications, electronic media on the Sabbath day. This might be our contribution to the world. It's really, and you see this, the people who they You can Google this if you wish, if you haven't encountered this idea of a digital Sabbath. There are people who are not necessarily Jewish who have adopted the practice of not using their phone one day in seven, on Saturday maybe, or Sunday, whatever it might be for them. And all the power to them. Good luck with that. I think they are finding that it's really, really hard to do that by yourself or with your family, because your kids have Little League and you want to meet up with friends for a picnic, and they're all using their phones and they're all using, Google Maps and texting each other to coordinate plans. And if you don't do that, you're going to be left out. It's really, really hard to do this by yourself. But if you have an entire community, all observing the same cycle, all observing in the same ways, it's self-reinforcing, because I know that I can go with my kids to the playground on Saturday afternoon, and I know I'll find dozens of people we know from our neighborhood who are all observing the Sabbath. I don't have to, right? I can walk down this block and knock on a friend's door, because they'll be expecting me. And maybe they went out, I'll miss them, but if they went out, they just went to the park, I can find them there. Or I'll go to a different friend who's probably home. I may, because we're all, no one's driving to visit grandma, no one's going shopping, no one's went back into the office for an urgent meeting. Everyone is just available for the family, for God, for ourselves, and our own personal growth, and for being part of a community. And if you haven't experienced it, you got to try it. It's really spectacular. And all the pieces fit together, because it's the refraining from the work which makes the time available. Everything has to be set aside in advance. The cooking, the chopping, the buying, it's all done before. So that on Shabbat, I'm just living in the world as God made it, as I worked to transform it during 6 days of work. And now on Shabbat, I'm just inhabiting the world as it exists. And nothing's taking me away. I have no place I have to be or go to. I'm just available for hanging out with friends, hanging out with family, reading that book you always wanted to read, studying Torah, without the distractions of the week. It's really, really spectacular. Questions, comments? Okay. That was letter number 7. Number 8, I think we sort of alluded to. We don't carry things between areas on Shabbat. That's one of the melachot. So is carrying from a private domain to a public domain, from a public domain to a private domain, or more than 4 cubits, about 6 feet in a public domain. We can get around this prohibition under certain circumstances with the use of something called an eruv, which is a symbolic merging of boundaries. Instead of I can't carry from my domain to your domain, from your domain to mine, from mine to a public. But if we say all of our private domains are going to be merged together, because we're going to share our food with each other, and say we're all going to give each other permission to go into each other's homes, and we take the entire neighborhood and it's surrounded by a wall, or by maybe even symbolic walls, like the metro tracks in the west to the seawall to the east, and some wires that are strung between poles on the north and on the south, and Irving Park and Fullerton. So it's like some sort of boundaries around the neighborhood. We've all agreed to share our food in common. It's a box of matzah up there on the shelf behind those books, which is owned by the entire community. Anybody can come and take it and eat it. So we all have food owned in common. Our neighborhood is surrounded by symbolic boundaries, and city council passed a resolution authorizing us to go and carry at each other's homes. And so in those boundaries, we can carry things we might need for the Sabbath outside of our homes. Push a baby, carry a baby, keys, things like that. Within a community which doesn't have an eruv, it's much harder to observe the Sabbath. To say can't carry, so you can hide your key underneath the doormat, or you attach them to your belt in a certain way, or you tie them around. You use them to keep your shoes on your feet. You carry them in a way that you don't carry them. You wear them in a way that's functional for your clothing, or you stay home or take turns staying home with the baby. It's not easy, but it's very doable. It's very, very doable. But now in most major Orthodox Jewish communities, there is an eruv, which makes it a lot easier and more pleasant. The other space-related prohibition on Shabbat is against walking more than 2,000 cubits, again, about 3,000 feet outside of a settled urban area. In a big place like Chicago, you could walk for days and days, and you're not going to leave a settled urban area. But if you can imagine, a village surrounded by fields, or a city surrounded by forests. Okay, you reach the border of the city, you can't walk more than 2,000 feet in any direction outside the walls of the city. Okay, you're supposed to be where you're meant to be on Shabbat. You can't go from city to city. Again, in a big developed area like Chicago, where most of us live, you can walk for days, okay, without leaving the settled area. But if you come to the edge of the homes, there's no more homes, and all that's left are fields or forests, then you have a you have a you have a link. You have a limit. Okay. Questions, comments? Okay. Let's see what's next. Okay, so then communal. So Shabbat is also, so okay, so we spoke about letter A, we talked about the positive commandments of Shabbat, to sanctify the meals over, reciting blessings over wine, to mark the beginning of Shabbat, the end of Shabbat, to have good food and clean clothes and a clean home, and to eat, a nice Friday night meal, a nice Shabbos lunch, a third meal, Shabbos, at the end of the day, in the afternoon of before the day ends. We talked about the prohibitions that make it possible for us to observe those positive commands because we've carved out time, we've protected that time from all of the things that keep us busy otherwise. The third aspect is the communal aspect, right? Because we have made, and I looked at this as well, we've made this time available, we're available for community as well. So that means that the community comes together in prayer on Shabbat the way that we don't necessarily do during the week. Jews pray 3 times a day, and it's advisable and good and positive to pray with the congregation 3 times a day. We have, our doors are open for communal prayers every morning and every afternoon and evening, and that's great. But people have other responsibilities to sometimes interfere with prayer with the community. They pray at home. They pray in a lunch break at work. In the afternoon, in an office, rather than gather with the congregation for daily prayers. I mean, many do care a lot about daily prayers. It's really good, but it's not always possible for everyone. On Shabbat and holidays, it's really, really common to gather in the synagogue for communal prayers. So even though we might have 10, 15, 20 people for daily prayers on a Monday evening, Monday afternoon, we could have 100, on Shabbat morning, or 200, 300, okay? A congregation of our size. And we really try to come together and pray together as a congregation. We also read Torah, okay? The 5 books of Moses, is divided into sections that correspond to the weeks of the year, such that we read the entire Torah, all 5 books of the Torah, over the course of a year. And so that's also something we do together as a congregation. We hear the Torah being read, and some exceptions, which are okay, but basically every Jewish community in the world is reading the same Torah portion. So it becomes a way to orient conversations. The themes that come up in this week's Torah portion, Jews all over the world are talking about. Jews all over the world are experiencing reality, current events, concerns in the family life through the prism of this week's Torah portion. Rabbis all over the world are trying to inspire their congregations with messages from this week's Torah portion. Okay, so it's an orienting focal point for the community, and we all come together and hear it. It can take 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes, depending on the length of the portion and the speed of the person reading, but it's a major focus of what we do together in synagogue on Shabbat morning. What else we have? We have a Musaf. Musaf is the extra prayer service on holidays, right? We pray 3 times a day, every day of the year: Shachrit in the morning, Mincha in the afternoon, and Ma'ariv in the evening. On special days when in the temple there was a special additional sacrifice offered, the corresponding prayer is called Musaf. Okay, so we say it after Shachrit, after the morning prayer service. We say an additional prayer service. We said an additional prayer corresponding to the additional sacrifices that were brought on Shabbat and special days. So that's okay. Questions, comments on this? Okay. I think we may pause here because this is a good place to stop because we finished that Roman numeral, and the next section is like a good, will take us a while. So I think we're going to pause here. The only caveat is that because of holidays, actually, we're not going to have, let's just look at the calendar to see when we're going to meet next. Let's see, a week from Monday, the 23rd, there's a shul summer soiree. You were all invited to attend the shul soiree. If we actually have, we can comp you tickets if money is a barrier, but you're all encouraged to celebrate with us. It's not like a boring shul dinner. The speeches are really short. There's lots of hors d'oeuvres. We can daven mincha on the porch at the Center and Hassad. It's a really lovely evening. So I mean, I encourage you to attend if you're okay, but I can't teach next Monday. That's happening then. The following Monday is Memorial Day, and I'm not going to be teaching on Memorial Day. The following Monday is Shavuot. Okay. If you're in Lakeview, Shavuot is the best holiday. Look at the shul website and get on the shul email list distribution to get the schedule for Shavuot. It's a really, really fun holiday, and we celebrate it in a really awesome way in Lakeview. All of the Jewish congregations join together Shavuot night, and we study Torah all through the night, and every teacher and lots of other people as well offer classes in different rooms all through the night, and it's a wonderful way to celebrate Shavuot, which is the holiday that commemorates the giving of the Torah. So I strongly encourage you to join us for Shavuot celebrations. That's Monday the 6th, it starts Saturday night and goes through Monday the 6th. Monday the 13th, I'm out of town at a wedding. Monday the 20th, I'm out of town at a conference. And Monday the 27th, I'm already on my way for a 3-week vacation. So the next chance for us to meet and learn together is going to be Monday, June 25th. So we can meet at 9 p.m. or 8:40. Let's do 8:45. So I apologize for the delay. But you should all feel, welcome to schedule a meeting with me, send me questions via email or text, or schedule a phone call to the shul office. You don't have to wait that long and you should all feel invited to, especially if you're in Chicago, to come visit us for services. Okay, the synagogue's open. If you have questions, but on the website, there's a guide to first-time visitors to our shul. You could read that to help get oriented, but you also reach out with questions if you're nervous about coming, but just show up, okay? People are friendly here, and they'd be happy to, everyone would be happy to meet you guys. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording. Okay.